He said yes before the father finished the offer, and that was the moment that mattered. The wind snaps hard against the barn door as Samuel Walker sets the cup down, the sound sharp in the quiet kitchen. Eli's hand tightens around his hat, knuckles pale, boots still dusted with the road. "I'll take it," he says, voice steady, even though the man across from him hasn't said what the winter will cost. Somewhere behind the wall, a floorboard creaks, someone listening, not breathing. Samuel doesn't answer. He just watches, and doesn't look away. "Would you have said yes? Tell me below." The wind came down from the ridge like it had somewhere to be. It dragged dust along the narrow road and rattled the loose hinge on the Walker gate. Eli Turner stopped there longer than he meant to, one hand resting on the top rail, the other holding his hat low against his thigh. His horse shifted behind him, tired from the ride, reins hanging loose. The house sat quiet, solid, built from timber that had seen more winters than he had. A thin line of smoke lifted from the chimney and disappeared into the pale sky. Somewhere off to the right, a bucket knocked lightly against a well post, back and forth, back and forth. He could turn around. No one would know he'd come this far. Eli let his fingers tighten around the brim of his hat. The leather was worn soft from years of use, same as his boots, same as everything he owned. He pushed the gate open. It creaked louder than it should have. Each step up the path felt heavier than the last. Gravel shifted under his boots. The porch boards gave a low, familiar groan when he reached them. He stopped again at the door, close enough now to see the small scratches near the handle, marks left by years of use. Inside, something moved, a chair leg against wood, soft, careful. He raised his hand, waited, then knocked. The sound landed flat against the door and seemed to stay there. No answer at first, just the wind pushing along the walls. Then the latch turned, the door opened halfway. Samuel Walker filled the space like he belonged to it. Tall, broad through the shoulders, shirt sleeves rolled once at the forearms. His beard carried more gray than not, and his eyes settled on Eli without hurry, without question. He didn't ask who it was, didn't ask what Eli wanted, just looked. Eli took off his hat, held it in both hands for a second, before remembering to shift it to one. "Evenin', sir." Samuel said nothing. Eli felt the silence stretch, felt it settle into his chest and sit there. He stopped, cleared his throat once, started again, quieter this time. "I came to speak with you." The wind pressed at his back, cold, even for that time of year. Samuel's gaze didn't move. It stayed fixed, steady in a way that made Eli aware of everything at once. The dust on his coat, the tear along his sleeve, the thinness of his pockets. Inside the house, something shifted again. A faint scrape, then stillness. Eli didn't look. "I came to ask," he said, the words slower now, as if placing them down one at a time, "about your daughter." The porch seemed to hold its breath. Samuel's expression didn't change, not in any way Eli could read, but the space between them felt different, heavier. "I aim to see her proper," Eli added, before the silence swallowed him. "If you'll allow it." Nothing moved. Not the man, not the door, not the wind. Eli felt the back of his neck tighten. His grip on the hat shifted, fingers pressing harder than they needed to. He could hear his own heartbeat now, loud enough it felt like it might carry inside. Samuel Walker looked at him a long time, long enough for doubt to rise up and settle in Eli's gut, long enough for him to think of the 6 miles back to Henderson Land, long enough to picture himself already halfway down that road, this moment behind him, untold. long enough to almost step back. Inside, the faintest sound, fabric brushing wood. Someone standing just out of sight. Eli kept his eyes forward. Samuel's gaze moved once, brief, past Eli's shoulder, toward the yard, the hills beyond, the land stretching out under that hard Idaho sky, then back again. Still no question. Still no answer. Only that look. Eli swallowed. His mouth had gone dry. "I don't have much," he said, quieter now. Not as a defense, just as something that needed saying. "But I work steady, and I keep my word." The words landed between them, stayed there. Samuel Walker's eyes held him, and held him, and held him. Until the thought came, sudden and sharp. "Turn around. Leave it. Not yet. Not like this." Eli didn't move. The wind shifted again, pushing dust along the porch edge. Somewhere behind the house, a loose shutter tapped once, twice, then fell still. Samuel's hand rested on the doorframe, rough wood against rough skin. At last he stepped back half a pace, just enough to clear the doorway. "Come in," he said. No warmth in it, no welcome either, just space. Eli stood there for a second longer than he should have. Then he stepped inside. Behind him, the door closed with a low, steady sound, and from somewhere deeper in the house, unseen. Spring had come slow that year. Snow still clung to the shadowed sides of the hills, and the ground near the creek stayed soft long after it should have dried. The fence line between Henderson land and the Walker property had taken the worst of it. Posts leaned where they ought to stand straight. Wire sagged low enough a calf could slip through. Eli drove the first post in just past sunup. The hammer rang dull against damp wood. Each strike sank a little deeper, the earth giving way under it. His sleeves were rolled, forearms marked with old scrapes, fresh dirt pressed into the lines of his hands. He worked steady. No rush, no wasted motion. The wind picked up around mid-morning. It came sideways across the field, catching the loose wire and pulling it tight, then slack again. Eli set his boot against the base of a post and leaned his weight into it, trying to hold it upright while he reset the brace. "Hold it there." The voice came from the other side. He looked up. Lydia Walker stood a few yards off, one hand already on the leaning post from her side of the fence. She had tied her sleeves back with a strip of cloth. Dust clung to the hem of her skirt. Her hair was pulled back, though a few strands had worked loose in the wind. She didn't smile. Didn't hesitate either. Eli shifted his grip. "It'll pull if the wind hits it again." "I know," she said, and set her shoulder into the wood. The next gust came harder. The post tilted. She held it. Eli drove the nail, once, twice, a third time to set it. The wire steadied. For a moment neither of them moved. Then she stepped back, brushing her hands together, dust falling off in small clouds. "That stretch has been trouble since last fall," she said, nodding toward the broken section further down. "Water comes through fast when it rises." Eli glanced that way. "Henderson's been meaning to fix it proper." She looked at him. Not long. Just enough. "Seems like you're doing it." He shrugged once. "Already out here." That was all. He moved down the line. She did the same on her side. They worked like that for a while. Not together exactly, but not separate either. When he set a post, she checked the wire. When she tightened a knot, he held the line steady. After some time, she came back with a tin cup and a small canteen, held it out across the fence. "Water." Eli took it, careful not to touch her hand. Drank once, then again. The water was cool, with a faint taste of metal from the tin. "Thank you." She nodded, took the cup back. Didn't leave. You ride for Henderson? She asked. Most days. He keeps you through winter? Depends on the year. She looked out over the land, toward the hills, toward nothing in particular. My father says this stretch won't hold if the ground keeps shifting. Eli set another nail. He's right. She glanced back at him. You always agree that easy? He wiped his hand on his pants. Not always. That earned the smallest change in her expression. Not quite a smile. Something close. The wind eased. For a few minutes, it was just quiet. The kind of quiet that settles in when there's work enough to fill it. By the time the last post stood straight, the sun had climbed high. Eli gathered his tools, coiling the leftover wire. He swung up into the saddle without much thought. Lydia stood where he'd left her, one hand resting lightly on the fence. Appreciate the help, he said. You didn't ask for it. No. Another pause. Then she said, You'll be back out here? Eli adjusted the reins, looked at the line they'd just fixed. Fence'll hold for now, he said. But it won't stay that way. She nodded, as if that answer was enough. He tipped his hat, turned the horse, rode off slow at first. Let the animal find its pace. Halfway up the rise, he looked back. He hadn't meant to. She was still there, not moving, just standing by the fence watching the line they'd set, then lifting her eyes toward him as if she'd known he would turn. Eli faced forward again, kept riding. The next time he passed that stretch, it wasn't by accident. And the time after that wasn't either. By early summer, folks in town had started to notice. At the general store, a man named Victor Hale leaned against the counter more often than not. Boots clean, coat well kept, the kind of man who didn't have to explain himself. He spoke with Samuel Walker in low tones. Papers sometimes spread between them. Talk of land, of cattle, of futures that didn't depend on weather alone. Eli saw him once from across the street. Didn't go in. Rode past instead. Out toward the fence line, where the posts stood straight, and someone might be there, or might not. That evening, as the light went soft and gold across the valley, Eli finished a stretch of work and sat a moment in the saddle, looking toward the Walker place in the distance. The house caught the last of the sun. A figure moved on the porch. He didn't stay long enough to see who it was. The kitchen held the kind of quiet that made a man aware of his own breathing. Eli stood just inside the door, hat in his hands again, turning at once without thinking. The room was clean, not polished, not for show, just kept. A long table sat near the window, 3 chairs on one side, one at the end. A coffee pot rested on the stove, steam lifting slow and steady. Samuel Walker took his place at the far end of the table without a word. He didn't gesture for Eli to sit. Didn't need to. Eli stepped forward and pulled the nearest chair back. The wood scraped faint against the floor. He sat. Set his hat on his knee. From somewhere down the hall, a floorboard creaked once, then still. Samuel poured coffee into a plain tin cup, pushed it across the table. The motion was simple, exact. Eli took it. The metal was warm against his fingers. Thank you. Samuel leaned back just enough to rest his hands on the table. He studied Eli again, slower this time, as if he had all the time in the world. You said you came to ask about my daughter. Eli nodded once. I did. Another stretch of quiet. Outside, the wind moved past the walls, softer now, the kind that didn't rattle, just past. Samuel's eyes shifted, not away, but through Eli, like he was measuring something beyond what could be seen. What do you have to offer her? It wasn't said sharp. That made it harder. Eli looked down at the cup for a moment. The surface of the coffee trembled slightly in his hand. "I don't have land," he said. "Not yet." Samuel didn't move. "I don't have savings worth naming. Work comes when it comes. Henderson keeps me through most seasons. Winter's thinner." Still nothing from the other side of the table. Eli lifted his eyes again. "But I work steady," he said, "and I don't walk off a job half done." The words settled between them. Samuel reached for his own cup, but didn't drink, just held it. "You think that's enough?" Eli didn't answer right away. He set his cup down, carefully, made sure it didn't scrape. "I think it's what I have," he said. That earned the smallest shift in Samuel's expression. Not approval. Not disapproval. Just a change. From the hallway, the faint sound again. Fabric against wood. A breath held too long. Samuel heard it. Of course he did. He said nothing. Instead, he leaned forward, elbows on the table now, hands clasped. "There's a place north of here," he said. 8 miles past the ridge, stone ground, poor water, wind doesn't let up. Eli listened. "Belongs to a woman named Martha Cole. Lost her husband 2 winters back. She's got a boy. 12 maybe." Samuel paused, letting the shape of it settle. "She's about to lose what's left of her herd." Eli's fingers stilled on his hat. Samuel continued. "I told her I might send someone. Someone who knows cattle. Someone who won't quit when it turns bad." He let that sit there. "No wages," he added. "She can't pay." The stove cracked softly as the fire shifted. "You'd be there from now until spring breaks proper," Samuel said. "No promise of anything after. No agreement. No guarantee." Eli felt the weight of each word. Not heavy all at once, but stacking. Samuel looked at him directly now. "If you're still sitting here in March," he said, "we'll talk again." Silence. Eli didn't look toward the hallway. Didn't need to. He could feel the presence there. Still. Waiting. Samuel opened his mouth to go on. Eli spoke first. "Yes." The word came out steady. No push behind it. No hesitation. Samuel hadn't finished. Eli knew that. Still. "Yes." Samuel stopped, held his gaze. For the first time, something like recognition passed through his eyes. Quick, gone just as fast. "You haven't heard the rest." Eli nodded once. "I've heard enough." From the hallway, the sound, sharp this time, a shift of weight, then still again. Samuel leaned back, picked up his cup, took a slow drink, set it down. That was quick. Eli let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. It didn't seem like something that needed thinking on. Samuel's mouth moved slightly. Not quite a smile. Most men would ask how hard the winter gets up there. Eli's thumb ran once along the edge of his hat. "I've seen enough winters to know the answer won't help." That sat there. Samuel stood. The chair legs made a low sound against the floor. He moved to the window, looking out toward the yard, the fence line beyond, the hills rising up in the distance. "Leave at first light," he said. "You'll need to make the ridge before the weather turns." Eli stood as well, picked up his hat. "Yes, sir." Samuel didn't turn. Eli took a step toward the door. From the hallway, she was there now. Lydia stood just out of the shadow, one hand pressed lightly against the wall. She didn't speak, didn't move closer. Just looked at him. There was something in her eyes. Not surprise. Something steadier than that. Eli paused, only for a second. Then he gave the smallest nod, turned, and walked out into the fading light. Behind him, the door closed. The road north narrowed after the second mile. By the fourth, it wasn't much of a road at all. Just two worn tracks cutting through dry grass and stone, climbing slow toward the ridge. Eli kept his horse steady, letting it choose its footing where the ground turned uneven. By dusk, the wind had changed. Colder, sharper. It came off the high ground without warning, pushing through his coat, settling into his bones like it planned to stay. Martha Cole's place sat low against the slope, half hidden by rock and scrub. The barn leaned slightly to one side. One shutter hung loose, tapping soft against the frame. A boy stood near the fence when Eli rode in, thin, shoulders too narrow for the coat he wore. He didn't wave, just watched. "You Eli?" the boy asked. Eli swung down from the saddle. "That's right." The boy nodded once. "Ma said you might come." He took the reins without asking, leading the horse toward the side pen. Inside the house, it was warmer than Eli expected. Not by much, but enough. Martha Cole stood by the stove, sleeves rolled, hands steady on a wooden spoon. She didn't come forward, didn't need to. "You ride far?" she asked. "Far enough." She gave a small nod, as if that settled something. "Supper's there," she said, tipping her chin toward the table. "You can eat." No welcome speech, no thanks, just room made. Eli ate what was set out. Beans, a piece of bread gone stiff at the edge, coffee that had been reheated once too often. That night, the wind picked up again. He lay on a narrow cot near the back wall, boots still within reach, coat folded once under his head. The boards creaked with every shift of the house. Outside, something loose knocked steady, like a clock that didn't keep proper time. Morning came gray. Work started before light settled. The barn needed shoring. The north fence had gaps wide enough to lose half the herd if the wind pushed hard enough. Eli moved from one task to the next without stopping to count them. The boy, Noah, followed at a distance at first. Watched. Didn't speak unless spoken to. "Hold that," Eli said once, passing him a length of wire. Noah took it, held it wrong. Eli adjusted his grip. "Like this." Noah nodded, tried again. Better. By the third day, he didn't have to be told twice. Snow came early that year. Not heavy at first. Just a dusting that settled into the low ground and stayed. Then more. Enough to hide the rock lines. Enough to slow the cattle. Eli walked the fence line each morning before the sun cleared the ridge. Checked posts, tightened wire, reset what the wind had taken loose overnight. Some nights he didn't come in until after dark. Martha left food out anyway. No words passed over it. The first real storm came in January. Wind howled across the open ground, carrying snow sideways, blinding, cutting. The barn door wouldn't hold. Eli braced it with a plank, drove nails through wood that cracked under the cold. The cattle pushed against the fence, restless. Noah stood in the doorway, eyes wide, not moving. "Inside," Eli said. The boy didn't move. Eli crossed the yard in 3 strides, caught him by the shoulder, turned him back toward the house. "Inside," he said again, lower this time. Noah went. That night, the temperature dropped hard. Eli worked until his hands stopped feeling like hands. Just weight at the end of his arms. He came in long enough to drink something warm, sat for maybe a minute. Then the wind shifted. Something out there changed. He heard it before he saw it. A break in the fence. He was already on his feet. By the time he reached the line, the snow was waist deep in places, the wind driving straight into him. One section of wire had gone down completely. Posts pulled loose where the ground had given way. And in the white, movement. A smaller shape, away from the herd. "Noah!" The name tore out of him before he thought. No answer. Eli pushed forward, each step heavy, breath burning in his chest. He found the boy near the fallen line, one hand caught in the wire, coat half buried, eyes open but unfocused. Eli dropped to one knee, pulled the wire free, lifted him. The boy was light, too light. "Stay with me," Eli said, though he didn't know if the boy could hear. The wind swallowed the words anyway. The walk back felt longer than the ride north. Each step a pull, each breath thinner. He kept going. The door burst open before he reached it. Martha took the boy without a word, her hands quick, sure. Eli stood there a second longer, snow melting off his coat, running down onto the floor. Then he stepped inside, closed the door behind him. No one said anything. That night, the storm passed. Morning came quiet. Too quiet. Eli stepped out onto the porch, the world covered in white, the fence line half buried but still standing where it needed to. He checked it anyway. Every post, every line. By the time the sun broke through, he was back at work. No one marked the night. No one spoke of it. The winter went on. It didn't end all at once. The snow thinned first along the ridge, where the wind had stripped it bare. Then the ground near the barn began to show through, dark and damp, holding the cold a little longer than the sun liked. Water started running where there hadn't been any in months, cutting thin lines through the dirt. Eli noticed it the morning he didn't have to break ice in the trough. He stood there a moment, bucket in hand, watching the water move on its own. Didn't say anything, just set the bucket down and went on with the day. By the time he left, the fence still stood. Not perfect, not straight in every place, but standing. The herd was smaller than when he'd come. That was the truth of it. But what remained moved steady, heads down, weight back on their bones. Martha met him at the door when he brought his saddle out. "You heading back?" she said. "Yes, ma'am." She nodded once, no surprise in it. Noah stood behind her, hands in his coat pockets. He didn't look at Eli at first, then he did. "Fence'll hold," the boy said. Eli gave a small nod. "You keep checking it." "I will." That was enough. Eli mounted up without much ceremony, adjusted the reins, looked once at the barn, the house, the stretch of land that had taken everything he had, and asked for more. Then he turned north to south. The ride back felt shorter, or maybe he just didn't count it the same way. When he reached the Walker place, the snow was gone from the yard. The gate hung the same as before, the hinge still loose. He opened it, closed it behind him. Samuel Walker stood on the porch. Same place, same posture. Only the coat was lighter now. Eli tied off his horse and walked up the path. Boots clean for once. No fresh mud, no new dust. He stopped where he had stood before. "Sir?" Samuel didn't answer right away. His eyes moved over Eli, slower than before. Not searching, just taking measure. "Pete Connell rode through up north," Samuel said at last. "Said the coal place didn't lose the herd." Eli shifted his weight slightly. "No, sir." "Said the boy's working the line himself now." Eli nodded. "He learned quick." Samuel's gaze held. "You teach him that?" Eli looked down for a moment, then back up. He was willing to learn. That seemed to sit right. Samuel stepped down off the porch. One step, then another. Stopped just short of where Eli stood. "You get paid?" "No, sir." "You come back with anything at all?" Eli's hand rested once against his side, where his pocket sat flat. "No, sir." A long pause. Wind moved across the yard, softer now, warmer. "And you still came back here?" "Yes, sir." Samuel Walker looked at him. long enough for the weight of it to settle again. But it felt different now. Not as heavy, more like something being set in place. "I built this place," Samuel said, his voice lower, almost as if speaking to the space between them. "Didn't have much more than you when I started." Eli didn't speak. "Had to prove it the same way," Samuel went on. "No one promised me anything either." Another pause. Then Samuel nodded once. Small, decided. "There's pasture on the south side hasn't been used right in a while," he said. "Grass comes in uneven. Needs someone who knows how to work it." Eli didn't move. "That someone could take a small herd through the season," Samuel continued, "if he's willing to put in the work." Eli understood. He didn't say it out loud. "Yes, sir," he said instead. Samuel held his gaze one last time, then turned, heading back toward the porch. Didn't say more. Didn't need to. Eli stood there a second longer, then stepped back, turned toward the yard. She was there. Lydia stood near the side of the house where the light caught just along the edge of her shoulder. She hadn't been there a moment before, or maybe she had. Hard to say. She walked toward him, not fast, not slow, just steady. Stopped an arm's length away. Neither of them spoke. Eli's hand rested at his side. Hers lifted, found his. Simple as that. No question in it. No hesitation. The kind of thing that had already been decided somewhere else. Eli let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. The wind moved through the yard again. Warmer now. A year later, the south pasture held its own. Fence straight. Grass thick where it needed to be. The herd moved easy across it. No rush, no crowding. Eli stood at the far edge one evening, watching them settle. The house behind him caught the last of the sun. On the porch, Samuel Walker sat with a child on his knee. Small, wrapped in a blanket that didn't quite stay put. Samuel adjusted it without thinking. His eyes moved out across the field. Found Eli. Held there a moment. Then he said, quiet enough it didn't carry far. He stayed. And that was all. Do you want me to continue further, or revise anything? And that was all. Do you want me to continue further, or revise anything? If you stand there for a moment, really stand there, you can almost feel it. The wind moving through that pasture, the weight of a long winter still sitting in your bones, the quiet of a man who came back with nothing and somehow brought back everything that mattered. Imagine being in his place, no promise waiting at the end, no one telling you it would be enough, just the choice to keep going when no one is watching, to show up when it would be easier to turn around, to hold steady, not because you're sure of the outcome, but because it's the kind of man you decided to be. That's what stayed. Not the money, not the land, not even the words that were never said. Just the way he chose to stand in the cold and not walk away. And maybe that's where it lands with us. Sometimes life doesn't hand you an answer. It hands you a stretch of ground, a long season, and the question of who you are when it gets hard. And somewhere in the middle of that, without noticing, you become someone worth waiting for, someone worth building a life beside. If this story found you tonight, I'd like to hear where you're listening from. Just leave a quiet note below. And if you feel like staying a little longer, there are more stories like this waiting. Stories about people who didn't have much, but chose to stay, to build, to love anyway. I'll be right here when you're ready for the next one.